Hello, this is Pastor Jim Carlson, and this is a 20-minute movie of the building of the facility at Calvary Church of the Pacific in Aiea, Hawaii. The film was initially an 8mm movie, which was transferred to a VCR and now to a DVD. Here you can see the volunteers as we built this amazing facility on 1 acre of land. That's right, 1 acre of land. The developer wanted $300,000 for the 1 acre. Land in Hawaii is like gold, and we could not afford that. We negotiated with him for at least a year, and finally he dropped $100,000 from the price, and we did borrow $200,000 from the Baptist General Conference to purchase the property. The building ultimately cost us about $100,000, and that is because so much of the materials were donated and almost all of the labor. Here you can see Ed Ock, who was a volunteer who came from Napa, California. He was retired and he stayed with us the entire time, together with another volunteer from the mainland, Earl Mitchell, who was an engineer, and there you can see him in the helmet. This is one of the Saturdays where we constructed the church, and you can see several of our church members there working to put those 12-inch concrete blocks down where they needed to be in order to build the retaining walls that had to be built. This was built on the side of a hill, and we actually had to cut into the hill and go up 3 stories. So the bottom floor was entered from the parking area, and as you know, the top floor we had a bridge from the sidewalk into the sanctuary. The middle floor we designed to be our youth room. There you saw Cully Olson, who was the executive director of the Northern California Baptist Conference, and he was tremendously helpful in getting this project underway and supported us 100%. There you can see Pearl Harbor in the distance. You see the Arizona Memorial. And if you look from the Arizona Memorial, you can actually see Calvary Church of the Pacific. There's Earl Mitchell spraying down. As we finished excavating, we dug into the side of the hill, as you can see, and when we got to the elevation where we were to pour the foundation for the entire building, we hit solid rock. So Calvary Church of the Pacific is built on solid rock, not only literally, but on the rock of Jesus Christ. And it's amazing how we were able to subcontract everything done that needed to be done, other than that which we could do with our volunteers. And everybody gave us wonderful prices. These were all local people. You can see that the retaining walls that we had to build, the steel in the retaining walls came from the husband of Jane Fujikawa, who that was his business. And when he would deliver the steel, he would also give us an envelope with an invoice, and together with the invoice was a check to pay for it all. So that was just one of the great blessings as we considered and as we pressed ahead, and God provided. Here you can see the concrete being poured. We poured, I don't know how many hundreds of yards of concrete to create the footings for the retaining walls. There's Ed Ock. He's pounding in and getting all that steel ready for the forms and the concrete that had to be poured. There's Charlie Fukuhara. He was our first convert. Without him, we could not have done this. He, at the time, was the superintendent for a large construction company and built most of the high-rises in, well, not most of them, but a lot of them in Waikiki. There's Sandy Waterhouse. He owned several gift shops in Waikiki. There's Shige Tsukayama, and he was a public relations man for United Airlines, but he always wanted to come out and work. He's gone home to be with the Lord since. there are so many who were part of the construction crew who had never done this kind of work before, but they were instructed on how to do it, and we all chipped in. On Saturdays, we would have a whole crew come out, and many times after work, 5 o'clock, we'd be out there working, and there you can see the footings that were poured for the first floor of the facility. The building construction was actually started in 1976. That was 3 years after the church was founded in 1973. So God blessed in a very short period of time, and we were able to undertake this building project. It took us 19 months to complete. And there's Ed Auk again. He was in his 70s, but he worked every day just as hard as anyone can work. Now here you can see we put up the walls for the first floor, and that crew is the crew that works on the high-rises in Waikiki, and they work for Charlie Fukuhara, and he asked them to come out and help us pour 60 yards of concrete. And they did a fantastic job, and they would do anything for Charlie. They loved him so much, and he was such a good superintendent. A crane was used on this occasion to load, I believe, about 3 yards of concrete that was poured at any given time. And this was the time when we had clouds in the air and rain threatened. And before we poured, we gathered everybody together in a circle, and we held hands and we prayed and said, Lord, please hold the rain so we can pour today. And God held the rain. And here these men, I'll tell you what, we had to pour concrete on 3 floors, and each time we had to pour 60 yards of concrete, they came out and did the job for us and donated their time, and this is built as well as any high-rise down in downtown Waikiki. And this is what they did for a living, but they did this now to the glory of God, and they loved doing it for us. Well, this was an amazing day because we probably had 40 men together with volunteers all together coming out to help. And that man without the shirt is Dave Hammer, and he came after his retirement from a church on the mainland and became our assistant pastor. He was the father of Sharon Waterhouse. Sharon and Sandy Waterhouse were a great help. That's Jack Lee. And I believe that's Jack Lee, or maybe that's Richard Hall. But no, I think that was Richard Hall. He was a helicopter pilot in the military. There's Jack Lee. I'm following him. He was a fellow who came to know the Lord. Everybody said he'll never become a Christian. He's just too rough and rugged. I worked for the telephone company, and I went over there one day, and I said, Jack, let me talk to you. And I shared with him John 3:16. And we knelt in the living room, and he prayed to receive Christ. One of the most amazing conversions I've ever seen. Well, here we are once again. Charlie Fukuhara, he's making sure that everything is set the way it needs to be if we're going to pour this concrete. You can see all the conduit underneath, and we had electrical going all over the place, and that had to be put down before any concrete could be poured. This is one of Charlie's men emptying out his boot, and he was a great guy. I can't remember his name, but he was a fellow who finished all of the stairways that came up from one floor to another. And here's toward the end of the day as they're smoothing out the concrete. And we did have, as we continued to go up now, we're moving forward to a couple of months where we're going to put some precast concrete planks on the second, over the first floor, and then pour another topping of concrete over this. And you can see that's Ralph Clayton on this end, and he's helping with that concrete plank. As we had built all of the support system necessary to support this, And those precast concrete planks actually had some cables running through them, and the stress was put on the cable, and then after the concrete dried, after the slab was poured, the stress was taken off, the cables were cut, and so they were just about as strong as you could get, and 4 inches of concrete were poured on top of that, on top of those planks. Now this is all very professional construction, and it's amazing that we as a church were the general contractor. And the only way we could do it is because we had so many professional men helping us. As I mentioned, most of the work here was done by volunteers. In fact, it wasn't until later when we laid the blocks for the top floor that we actually hired some extra masons to do that. Well, this crane came in handy as we found ourselves unable to turn that flatbed around, so we just hoisted it and made sure we could get it out of the driveway, or out of the parking lot there at in the church. Yeah, this was exciting as we laid these planks in place, because we could begin to see the church take shape. And there's the support system that all had to be put in place. And so much of that support system was donated to us by the construction company that Charlie worked for. And everything had to fit in just so, and it did. It was put together like a puzzle, and it fit to a T. We didn't have any problems at all. Everything had been measured just exactly. And as I remember, the fellow who we purchased these planks from, he had just started his business, wanted us to get a good deal. There you can see the date, 9/24/77, and we are probably about halfway through the project, and once again we're getting ready to pour concrete on that second floor level. And we used the crane, and by the way, that crane was another piece of equipment that was donated to us. So much of what we did was donated, as I mentioned, and had we had to pay for everything, the church would have clearly cost us at least $500,000, if not more. And as I mentioned, there's Shige, and Shige was a big part of our construction, and there I am in the orange helmet, and we are getting ready to pour that second floor. Shige worked for a flooring company and a window company, and so when we needed all our flooring and our windows, he was able to get those for us. And one miracle after another allowed us to do this. One of the businessmen who attended our church initially said, "Pastor, if we go ahead with this as you've planned, and as the church has planned," he says, "we're going to go bankrupt. We're never going to be able to do this." I said, "Well, just wait. The Lord will supply." Well, there's Ralph Clayton. He was a senior master sergeant, very high up in the Air Force, and he came out almost every day after work to volunteer to help and do whatever he could. He could do just about anything, and he was fearless. And we did so much in the way of construction that we had never done before. Well, there's Charlie Fukuhara once again. He's making sure that everything is just exactly the way it needs to be. And you can see the houses that were being built up there on that drive. This was part of a development, and we actually purchased 5 lots for $200,000. And there's some of the men here just taking a break as we're getting ready to finish this off. And all of that Whirlybird equipment, of course, that was donated as well. Once again, you see Pearl Harbor there off in the distance. And now the walls are starting up on that second floor. And this was exciting because we began to realize that it wasn't going to be long before this was a church. And this ultimately was going to become the youth area, the youth room, the second floor. And I'm deliberating with Charlie there about the plans and how everything is supposed to go. And I said to whoever was taking the movie, here, take some film with Pastor Dave Hammer and I showing how hard we work. And so we passed blocks from one pile to another. And you can see that we were out there. And of course, we always had to cut steel in order to accommodate the windows. We didn't want it sticking up through the windows. So that's some of the work that I did. And it wasn't long before we were going to have a service and dedicate this second floor to the Lord. And here we are. This is just down below our property, right next to it, on the grounds of Aiea High School. And our church was built right next to Aiea High School. Its only claim to fame, as far as I know, is that Bette Midler graduated from Aiea High School. But there's our congregation. And at this time, we probably had, 150 people in our congregation. There was Doug Brown, and he was a youth man who came from the mainland, from California, to help us with our young people. And there I am, and Pastor Dave, several others. And we had a service outside here because we wanted to dedicate our second floor to the Lord. And at this time, we were meeting on Sunday afternoons at Gloria Dei Lutheran Church on Cam Highway. But this was a Sunday morning service, and it was a service where we wanted to just encourage everyone that things were moving along and it wasn't going to be long. And I'm telling them, hey, God is doing some great things here. We were going to have a baptismal service too here. In just a minute you'll be able to see. And most of the people were local people. And we had quite a number of military as well. But many from Aiea, many who were second or third generation Japanese or Filipino. And there we are at the swimming pool